Hey, it's Jose Galison of No Way Jose. You can find me on the No Way Jose YouTube channel. You can also find me just about anywhere audio podcasts are at. My guest today is Phil Labonte of All That Remains. Today my topic is, you guys know I usually like to do topics, but every now and then I do a Who Is segment. And so, and this is going to be a Who Is Phil Labonte. So we're just going to be mostly talking about him, his progression, shit like that. We might cover some other stuff. We'll probably cover a tad bit of current events, which is ironic because I have my show set to release a week or two later, so it won't make sense later. But there was some big shit that popped off today, so I kind of had to talk about it. Yeah, as always, I like money, so give me that. Patreon.com/says No Way Jose 2020. You can also give me crypto at endthefed.app. With that, I'm gonna go ahead and bring on Phil. What's up, dude?
What's up, man? How you doing?
Good. Yeah, it's fucking surreal being here with you. Like, I used to fucking, in high school, be listening to fucking Fall of Ideals.
Sick, man.
Yeah, I think I stole it from my buddy. And they're like, yeah, I don't remember why. I don't know if he gave it to me or stole it, but it was mine after that, so I didn't give it back.
You might have thought you stole it, but really, it was just a few years after that record came out where all music became free anyways. As soon as the iPod the iPhone got out and people were like, oh, I gotta have the iPhone, within 3 years, like the price of music didn't matter anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I was CD, so I mean, I've always been a little more old school. I was like, everything I've always jumped on late when it comes to the technology side of things. So I was very much still a CD guy at that point. So yeah. I jacked that CD and I listened to that thing on like repeat. I'm sure you hear this all the time, but that fucking album was killer.
I tell you what, for me to be, to have done a record that has kind of touched so many people, it doesn't get old. When people are like, I really love that. It's like it's the record that put us on the map. It's the record that has made, my whole career possible. So I appreciate that you enjoyed it. And I appreciate anytime anyone says, hey man, I love this record or this song or whatever. It's a big deal to me because All That Remains has been my job for, the better part of the past 15 years, 16 years, something like that. So it's deeply humbling and something I'm really, really grateful for.
Yeah, it's just funny too because like just the nature of the type of music you produced and like the time in my life when I was listening to it and then what we're doing now, like we're mostly gonna be talking about you, like your philosophy, your morality, your theism, atheism, or shit like that. Like if you told 17-year-old me that, they'd be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like this just doesn't, why would you be talking to Phil Labonte about that? Like it just didn't make sense. Like I was literally like, I was on a show the other day and we were talking about how I was going to be coming on, having you coming on. And I was like, I legit was like snorting rails off of convenience store bathrooms while listening to this shit. So it's like,
nice.
Like I was doing degenerate shit at this time of my life. So
awesome.
It's just weird that like now it's come full circle.
Partying properly.
Yeah, no, I had a crazy life. So I was very much the jock type, but I also was like made good grades, but like because of that, I was able to keep my head under the radar to where people didn't know what the fuck I was really doing.
You take off. You kept it together enough so that way you could party hard and have a good time, but still keep your parents off your cocaine scent.
Yeah, exactly. No, it's funny. So all right, fucking current events. I'm sure you know exactly what I'm getting at, which I mean, whatever. This is a perk of being a patron. This will actually make sense. It'll be kind of funny because it's like a couple of weeks from now when this releases, it'll kind of come more into focus, like the effects of this. Because I'm more concerned what you think the effects are. I'm assuming you do you have any idea what I'm getting at, or any more clear? Because it was pretty big thing today.
The things that I've noticed that, or the things that I've heard about today, are the inflation and the what looks like it's going to be a legit war in Israel.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know. I might be onto it, or I mean, there was the if you're vaccinated, you cannot wear a mask anymore, like as if they had any goddamn authority to fucking tell you what you could wear in the first book, where you could, if you had to wear a mask or not in the first place, So, but no, what is it that's on your mind?
It was that exactly. I guess maybe it's more prolific to me because it just, when it happened, it just seems so surreal. Because like we've been talking about this forever, that like this is where they're going with it. This is what we're doing. Yeah. They're gonna dangle the carrot and be like, hey, if you're vaccinated, whatever. And it's also like in my head, like it's weird that they're doing this, like if you're vaccinated, but they don't really have the infrastructure necessarily or buy-in in place for their like vaccine passport thing. So is this them giving up, or is this they're going to institute the vax passport thing? So like I don't know. I'm like it's very you know what I mean? It's kind of weird, and it's also you can go a whole lot of different ways with this. It's just very odd, and I feel like it's kind of weirdly significant, although it's kind of not, because in reality, everyone. I mean, you're in Texas, I'm in Florida. I mean, no one gives a fuck where I'm at. Like we wear it, sort of wear it places, but it's more like just leave me the fuck alone. Whatever, I'm wearing this, and then we'll take it off, and you know.
I think honestly, the federal administration, the Biden administration is playing catch up. I think that because Texas and Florida have shown that they've said, we're not going to do this anymore. Texas, I know Abbott got rid of it in March. I think it was. I'm not sure when DeSantis did, but I mean, I don't think DeSantis ever had like a mandate for the whole state. I'm not sure. But both Texas and Florida have kind of, just done their own thing, and cases have gone down and people have gone out and about their lives and cases have been going down. So the rest of the country is seeing that, and they're just kind of like, well, we are going to go ahead and start doing what we want to do. And also you see what's going on in California with the recall for Newsom, and that's 100%, because of the lockdowns and stuff in California and stuff. People are getting sick of it. And I think that the writing is just on the wall. And so I think the administration was like, we need to save face and figure out a way to look like we're being proactive about this and pull back the restrictions, because no one's listening to them anyways. I think that's the most likely scenario.
Yeah, I mean, this goes a bunch of different ways. I am kind of curious if this means that it will kind of further the divide between the red and the blue states, because I could totally see the blue states, because it said in that thing, like, aside from like local, state, whatever mandates. So I could totally see, like, say, like Cali, like fucking, then like still being like, well, we're still doing this until you're vaccinated, or maybe pushing down more on the vax passport type thing in their areas. But then the other places, like the red states, are going to feel more of a permission to kind of let up more. So I don't know, because it's kind of the same. It's almost the reverse of what happened with Trump, like with when the shit first popped off, where he kind of very much put it off to the states, and this was almost in a kind of a way like Biden putting it off to the states. So it's like, is this going to like further that divide? Which I'm actually all for that divide. Like, I mean, I'm not necessarily like a secession type guy. I mean, I'm fine with either way. I would prefer more of like a soft secession, because I'm like, we'll talk about this later, but I'm an anarchist, and I would prefer. I think freedom is going to be more presentable in a soft secession type scenario. I don't necessarily think we should be like this, like divided teams where it's like, I'm no longer in the state, I'm in the state, whatever. It would almost be better if it was more like the red states were just like, well, we're just not doing that. So, you know what I mean? Like, you don't have to have this formal, like, we're leaving, but it could just be like, I mean, if they don't do it, they don't do it. Like that's all there is to it.
Yeah.
So.
That just reminds me of like, Tom Wood's kind of perspective on nullification, where you just kind of say, okay, you guys can do that. We're just not going to do that here. Yeah. And DeSantis has really been, the guy that's kind of leading the charge on that. He's been very much like, or it seems from an outsider's view, that he's been very much like, this is what we're doing in Florida, and the rest of the country, you guys can do what you want to do, but we're going to do this here. And it's worked out pretty well. And I think that that's the way that it should be. I think that I like the idea that you're talking about of a soft secession. I'm not so much like we need to get away, as much as I am, if the federal government is going to try to enforce things, then we need the state governments to interpose themselves between the populations and the federal government. And if necessary, then we might have to have a secession. I've been a proponent of an Article 5 convention of states to hopefully kind of cut some of the power off from DC. I would like to see the states assert themselves. And I'm open to everything up to and including amending the Constitution so states can secede if that prevents a civil war. If there was some kind of, actual civil conflict between states or people in the states or whatever, team red and team blue or whatever bullshit people want to go ahead and call it. If it prevents a war, then I'm good I'm for it, because I think, the last civil war, we had 500,000 people die, and I can't imagine that the death toll would be less. I envision something, and this is just, what I imagine it would be, but I imagine something along the lines of what's going on in Syria, where you've got multiple factions fighting each other. Excuse me 1 second. Hey, get out of there. My dog.
You're good.
Get in there. I scared the crap out of her too, because she knows she was doing something she's not supposed to. And she got busted. Get in there, Kennel. So yes, I imagine something like Syria, where it's like, I could very easily see the cops, local cops, fighting against some of the anarchist groups that are looking for confrontation with the police, possibly feds getting involved. If you have anarchist groups that are going out, some of the more the left-leaning anarchist groups like Antifa and stuff, if they start going out and messing with people that are kind of just to leave me alone people, I can see those people taking up arms and being like, all right, if you come into our neighborhood, we're gonna have a problem, because we did see that last summer. Antifa had gone into some more residential neighborhoods, and you had people that were just like, locals that were just normal people that weren't really political, that were just like, you're not going to come into our neighborhood and smash our place up.
I live in the country. I got a little excited when they said they were coming.
And I'm sympathetic to anarchists, because I like the idea of a small, or non-existent government. I like when Michael Malice says we should have 330 sovereign countries in this geographic area. I like that idea. I don't see it happening, but that doesn't mean I'm opposed to it. So if we can see that working out in an organized manner, where you don't end up with like warlords like they had in the Chaz and unqualified people running around with guns, just deciding that they're the law.
That's kind of where we're at anyways.
If you're law enforcement and you're enforcing immoral laws, you are wrong. In case you're unaware.
And you look at foreign policy, but it's kind of funny because people always say the warlords thing. It's like, we kind of have the biggest warlords right now.
We do. Absolutely. Absolutely. The irony of that statement is not lost on me.
I'm sure you've heard
it. Like I said, I'm familiar with anarchists, a lot of anarchist arguments. And I think that the anarchists have some really, really, really great arguments. And I think that, anarchy in a libertarian type anarchy is something that's very attractive to me. We haven't seen how, or I don't see how we get to that point, but that doesn't mean that I'm opposed to it, especially when the the option that we have now is a lot of untrained people, taser and shooting people with guns, that kind. Don't tell me that things are going to be significantly worse when you have, politically motivated law enforcement telling your normal citizens that are just trying to live their lives and go to work, they can't drive their car down there because there's a protest that's, protesting the police that are telling the people that they can't drive their car to work, So I'm not against, I don't have arguments against anarchy other than show me how it works.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's not an argument against it. It's just, let me see how it works. And if it works, cool, because I'm not committed to the state. I'm not committed to, I'm not a back the blue dude. I'm not that kind of dude at all. It's like, if you're doing a good job and you're doing the things that your community wants, cool. I back that because your community wants it. If you're not, then you're part of the problem.
Yeah, it sounds to me like you may actually be an anarchist.
I,
Just judging by some things you said, but
you know,
we'll get into that later. But
Sure.
I don't want to lead into it too much. But there's a lot of people who say that they don't see how it could happen, but it's not like you can be an anarchist and still recognize that anarchy will never exist. And I don't know, maybe
Sure.
you've heard that before, but it's almost more of like a frame of mind and understanding who has legitimacy over who. But because I mean, whether it exists or not, I actually think that government, like say something like racism, is probably a good example. It will always exist. There will always be some person somewhere that thinks they have some moral right to rule someone else, and
Sure.
there will be people who think that there are people who have a moral right to rule them. I mean, it's just a kind of a human nature thing. But just like with racism, there's always going to be in-group preference. There's going to be people who are scared of other like things that are other from them. So it's just a matter of like I mean, I've said many times. I mean, I'm not a fan of racism, but at the same time, as long as you aren't like using violence, like I don't really care. Really, that's like the big issue.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, that's one of those. That's something that like the people, a lot of the people in the Mises Caucus of the Libertarian Party kind of adopt, and it makes sense because if you have bad opinions, which is what racism boils down to, they're just really, really shitty opinions. But you keep them to yourself and you're not attacking people and you're not hurting anyone. And some people say that the nap is made up and whatever, and fine. I mean, I get why they say that, but if you're not, committing violence to other people and hurting other people, I don't think the state or anyone else has any business trying to thought police you. And really, if you're trying to stamp out racism or whatever, it really does. At some point, you're like, look, you're trying to thought police people. It's like, if you got shitty opinions, stay away from me with your shitty opinions. I don't want to hear about them. But I don't think anyone should be trying to find people's shitty opinion, find the people with shitty opinions and then re-educate them, because that's where you get into some real scary shit too.
Yeah, no, I mean, the racism ends up just being this big scary boogeyman that it's ever changing definition. So like yeah, but I just like using it as an example of like the anarchism thing, because it's like it's one of those things that will never go away. But it's like one of those things where it's like it still should be shunned. Would probably be a good way to put it, because it's kind of the same thing with racism. I'm not a fan of it. I will not aggress against you if you have that thing. Just like I guess I necessarily won't aggress against you if you believe in the myth of authority, that there are people who have the right to rule over you. I won't aggress against you, but unless you aggress against me. So, and I actually do think the NAP is made up, but it's a useful made up thing. So, so, but we'll kind of get that. Let's talk about you a little bit. I kind of want to know about, obviously you're well known for your music. So kind of like, we'll start off with that kind of softball shit. We'll start off with like how you got into music and maybe how that's affected your thinking and such.
I got into music because, I mean, when I was 14 years old, I was given a guitar. And I think like the first bands that I got into were like, probably the first band was like probably Poison in like 86 when I was like 11. And then it was very quickly after that, it was Def Leppard. And then after Def Leppard, it was Iron Maiden. And Iron Maiden was my favorite band for a long time. And then I got into Metallica and started getting into thrash bands and Slayer, and then into, death metal bands like Cannibal Corpse and Carcass and Entombed and Grave. Hey, come here, you. Django, come. Get in there. I haven't taken the garbage bag out yet, and she's after it. She's like, I know there's some stuff I can get into. Get in there. So yeah, it was like death metal and stuff. And that was what I did when I was, teen into my early 20s. It was just playing in heavy death metal bands. And I never thought that it was going to be a job, because my favorite bands, I would go and see them, and there would be 50 or 100 or 150 people at the show, because the music was really heavy. And, I didn't expect to ever be in a band that paid the bills, because those bands didn't pay the bills. I knew they went home and worked a day job. Hold on one second. I'm going to get this thing.
You're good. It's It's very much
problem solved.
You're good. It's very much like podcasting these days. And if you're getting into it to get rich, you're fucking wrong.
Yeah, you're totally wrong. Totally wrong.
I mean, it's not bad to make a little bit of money, but definitely don't expect to be making buku bucks.
Yeah, I mean, I figured I'd have a full-time job, and I'd go on tour when I could, and write a record and stuff. And that was like the goal. Like that's really all that I had in mind. And then as time progressed and I saw other bands that I'd come up with, start to go out on tour, and we started to go on tour, and I was like, wow, maybe we can actually, maybe I can actually do this more than just like on the weekends. Maybe I can go on tour and come home and work a job, and then blah, blah, blah. And then, and then we did the Fall of Ideals, and like, it was like, oh, hey, we're going to go ahead and put you on a video game, and we're gonna get this song in the Saw soundtrack, and blah blah blah, and we're gonna do these videos and blah blah blah. And I was like, holy cow, this might actually be like a job that I'm gonna do. And then from there it kind of snowballed, and I'm super happy to be able to do this as the only thing, be in a band, and I guess technically it's a content creator, which is what a lot of people are now, but in the aughts, the early aughts, it was doing whatever I could to get the next record out. And now it's what I do for a living. And I'm super lucky.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's one of those things. It's like one of those, like, it's like living the life type things. It's like, I mean, it's like the you got to do what you fucking want to do for fun. So, I mean, it's kind of like, it's like when someone's
mind blowing.
It's like when someone's like in professional sports. It's kind of like, you're like, I mean, a lot of people, I play sports. It's like, I would love to get fucking paid to do that. That would be dope, but I'm just not good enough. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, but it's, I'm sure it does feel like weird sometimes. You're like, what the fuck? Like, I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing it. I've been doing only a band since 2000. Like the last time I had a job was 2004. And so, we're going on, 17, 18 years or something like that. And it does. There are times when I'm still like, I can't believe that we have been able to do this for this long, because realistically, most bands don't get to put out 10 records, and we've got, we'll put out our 10th record next year, and I don't see any reason why we won't put out an 11th. Maybe we won't put out a full length, because nowadays working with record labels is, you don't really need to have a record label the way that you used to. And especially for a band like All That Remains, that we have a fan base, and there are people that when we put out a record, there are going to be people that are going to check it out and listen. And there are going to be people that come to our shows just because they want to hear Six, and just because they want to hear This Calling, and just because they want to hear 2 Weeks, and just because they want to hear What If I Was Nothing, and just because they want to hear, these songs that have been around forever. When we go on tour, we can only add usually 1 or 2 new songs from the new record, because people with 10 records, people expect to hear certain songs. And so, we're not going to go and play a tour without doing, The Air That I Breathe, and without doing This Calling, and without doing, 2 Weeks, and without doing The Last Time, and without, we've got multiple songs that have done really, really well for us at radio. So we have to do these songs because that's why people are showing up. So if we put out a record, that's cool, but in the future, we might not put out a full record. We might start doing what like a lot of hip hop and R&B artists do, is put out 2 or 3 songs, put out 2 or 3 songs, and then go on tour for those couple songs, and then go home and write a couple more, and put out 6 songs a year or 4 songs a year, and do 2 tours, and that might be the future. I don't know, but I don't see record companies being the alluring thing to a band like All That Remains in the future. I mean, why should I give them, the rights to our music?
Yeah, no, I think they're gonna be like one of those things that just dies here soon, because it just doesn't even make sense anymore. It's just so easy to put out content. Like you don't need any middleman. It's just, but yeah, it's kind of funny. I never thought of it that way. You're like weirdly kind of suffering from success, because I gotta think there must be some weird component to like touring where it is like a lot of the same songs, but at the same time you guys have such a big portfolio where there is a big. So it's not like you're that like God. I wish there's some comedy bit that came to mind. I can't think of it where it's like some like one hit wonder where it's like just like drunk people at a bar like play this.
Yeah. And it is like that's another thing that I've got to be super grateful for. Is like there are people that want to hear what if I was nothing, that are only there because they heard our cover of the Thunder Rolls. But at the same show, there's going to be people that are there that are just praying to God that we play the Weak-Willed from the Fall of Ideals and hoping that we do Dead Wrong For We Are Many. So we really do have, a lot of stuff that has really resonated with a lot of people. And we're fortunate that like we could go on tour with, we could go on tour with the Black Dahlia Murder and play an entire hour-long set that is every bit as heavy as the Black Dahlia Murder, or at the very least, all the songs would fit perfectly fine on that tour. And we can go on tour with a band like Buck Cherry and play an entire set where people are like, okay, yeah, that makes sense that they're on tour with Buck Cherry. It's a little heavier. We could go on tour with Seven Dust and play an entire set where it fits perfectly with Seven Dust. And there's not a lot of bands that can do that. Most bands can't walk that line or dip both their toes into heavy and then dip their toes into kind of the rock radio stuff. And we've been fortunate that we've been able to do what we want as a band and write the kind of songs and music that we want and still make it into a career.
Yeah, y'all got some pretty good range, so that's worked out well for you as well. All right, let's move along. I want to kind of talk about Reed actually was the one who sent me along a fucking a link to be like, yo, we need to check this out, because we talked a lot about religion and shit on his episode, and it was like a round table with like you, him, and some other guy, and it was like, and I was like, shit, like I mean I'd seen you on other stuff before, but I was like, this motherfucker is like, not that I thought you were ever like dumb, but it's just like, it's kind of like when somebody starts something, you're like, holy fuck, there's a lot more going on there than I thought. And
sure,
so I was like, all right, cool, I need to bring him on, we need to talk about this. I mean, I shot my shot, somehow you fucking saw me and fucking answered back. But because it's like you got like goddamn near 100K followers, so I was like, I'm just gonna get lost in the DMs. It was funny. I was like talking about this too. It was this thing where I sent like on Twitter, I sent you a thing, and I was like, hey, it'd be nice to come on your show or whatever. And then like actually, I didn't say it first. I said something that mentioned you. You liked and retweeted it, and then I fucking was like, oh, hey, I saw you did that. And I was like, hey, it'd be great to come on your show, or have you come on my show or some shit. And you liked it, and I was just like. I was like joking with a buddy. I was like, this is like when you're like young and dating and there's some chick that's like kind of giving you eye contact and you're like, does she want me? Like, is she just being friendly?
Yeah, right. What's up, girl? What's up, girl?
So it's like,
come on over and hang out at my house.
Like, is it appropriate to DM? I don't know. But yeah, anyways, yeah, that's kind of got me wanting to bring you on the religion part, because I was like, holy shit, like, because I'm an atheist. Me and Reed's an atheist. That was like a big part of my life for me, like. Going from theist to atheist. I thought it was kind of interesting because it seemed like for you were like, it wasn't as big of a deal for you. You were kind of like, it sounded to me, correct me if I'm wrong, you were more like the I don't know, like for example, my parents divorced growing up. My mom was the one who was super religious. My dad was the one who would bring me to like Easter like once a year. You know what I mean? Like, and it sounded to me you were more like the latter. Like my dad, your family was more like my dad's family than it was like my mom's. That like made it so I couldn't read Harry Potter and shit like that. Like it wasn't a huge part of your life. So I'm kind of interested, like, how that affected you, how that played into your thinking, because obviously at some point you had to make that jump from theist to atheist, but was it as big of a deal for you as it was for like me and Reed, where it was like such a huge part of our lives, or no?
When I was growing, I mean, I went to Catholic school growing up from first grade, I think, until like seventh grade. And I think that my parents wanted us to go to Catholic school, mostly because they didn't like the public schools, which, I mean, in the 80s, the public schools certainly weren't what they are today. Excuse me, but they really just wanted to have us out of public schools. And so I went to Catholic school. It wasn't a very strict Catholic school. I went to school in Massachusetts. I grew up in Massachusetts. So there wasn't a lot of the Southern kind of Baptist or Pentecostal, very, very strict religious people. at least not where, where I was from. Catholics, they tend not to be very, very strict in the dogma, I suppose. But I did go to church. I did the whole, I was an altar boy. I had the first communion, and I did it until like seventh or so grade, eighth grade. Like I was probably, I imagine I was like 11 or 12, I think, when I stopped going to Catholic school and I started going to public school. And so from then on, it was like, I don't know that I really believe this. I kind of started to think, well, maybe this is kind of like Santa Claus. Maybe this is just something they tell you, to get you to do, to be a good boy or whatever, be a good kid. And thankfully, I didn't have some kind of negative experience that I blamed on religion or that came from religion. So there wasn't a lot of animosity towards religion. There wasn't a lot of animosity towards my family for us going to Catholic sermons and stuff. It was a really, really, it was all a positive experience. Like I wasn't molested by the priest, like it was totally. Yeah, right. I don't remember. No, but yeah, like there was no, it was very wholesome, good, positive experiences. There weren't nuns at the Catholic school that I went to. They didn't smash our fingers with rulers or anything. All the horror stories that you hear. So, and when I left Catholic school, it was just like, hey, my friends, they're not in Catholic school. The friends that I hung out with outside of school were the kids that were near me, and they went to public school. So I wanted to hang out with, I wanted to go to school with my friends and kind of do that whole, like, because the Catholic school had kids from all over the city, and none of the kids that lived near me went to the Catholic school. So my parents were like, okay, you can, we'll put you into public school. So I didn't have any kind of significantly negative experience from religion at all. So it was just kind of, okay, I really don't think that I believe this anymore. And it was a very smooth transition. And I wonder if I ever actually believed in like life after death and stuff, because aside from the standard existential dread that everyone gets when they kind of think about the grave too long and too hard, there was never like there was never anything like, oh, I'm angry that I believed this, and I'm angry that these people lied to me, and I'm angry that I was, taken in by this dogma or whatever, because it's just like, well, I don't really believe that anymore, so I can just kind of go about my life.
Yeah, I think there's something to the fact that like me and Reed had that, like, it was way bigger part of our lives, so we ended up having that like angry atheist phase. So sure. Like it seems like you kind of, since it was never like a huge part of your life necessarily, it kind of wasn't a way but wasn't another, you didn't have that. And I think that kind of contributes to something you're getting at in his episode, and it's something that my thinking is starting to come around to now that I think the angry atheist phase is worn off. I'm starting to, I'm still not necessarily sold on it. It's been a thought I'm entertaining, thinking maybe there is some sort of utility to people being religious. Like I'm still, I can argue both sides of the fence on this one easily. I'm not sold on either, but I think there might be some utility to it. And I thought a great example of this was, you guys, I don't remember who brought it up, but you guys brought up the founders, and then they kind of brought up like, whoa, well, a bunch of the founders were theists and deists, or atheists or deists, and it was kind of like, but in my head, then it immediately was like, yeah, but the large populace of the United States at that time was religious, so it's kind of like, it's the populace was religious at large. And then you had these like kind of leaders. Like I'm an anarchist, but I'm not against leaders. I'm not. I mean, it's rulers that I have an issue with. So whether it be thought leaders, so I mean, I do think in a future society, in a true free society, you would have leaders per se. They'd just be more like thought leaders. Yep. And in this situation, they were thought leaders / kind of rulers, but they were not religious, but / kind of religious. And then they had these large populace of people under them that were. And I think there might be something to that like, because I was talking to Reed, and I've been mulling over too, is I kind of don't really like, I do care how you reach a conclusion, but if I can get you to the same conclusion as me, like say especially in relation to like liberty, then I'm great with that. If Christianity is the best way to get you there or whatever, or natural rights or the NEP or whatever it is to get you there, if I can get you to the same conclusion as me, hell yeah, that's where I want you to be. I mean, we can work on the way you got there, because I do think to some extent it does matter your reasoning to arrive at a position, because it can affect your further reasoning going forward. But there's something to Christianity. It's like this kind of prepackaged like ideology that's already sort of semi kind of ish friendly. And I know a lot of people are like, a lot of them are very much statist too, but I mean, they're also, you can easily, if you have the cursory and
Jose. Ruh-roh. Is that you or is that me? I'm going to check my internet. Oh, there you go.
Dude, where'd I lose you? I don't know the fuck it's doing this lately. It's fucking irritating me.
You were just saying that you didn't care how people got to where to liberty. It didn't really matter.
Super embarrassing. I've had a long period of time where this never happened. I don't know why the fuck the last few times it has, but whatever. Anyways, no, I just kind of like, I think there's something to religion, have this like prepackaged idea of like, hey, like generally speaking, it's kind of sort of good-ish. You can it's an easy kind of semi sort of pathway to get someone to liberty. I know a lot of people say that a lot of them are statists and stuff, but it's like you can all easily just sped off Bible verses or be like, well, did Jesus really think that? I mean, me and you both know that a thousands-year-old fucking book, you can kind of make it believe whatever the fuck you want it to believe. But but modern day depiction of that prepackaged ideology is fairly friendly to liberty. So there's something to that. So
yeah, I mean the founders believed that you couldn't have a free society without a virtuous society. And I think that there's a lot of talk nowadays about rights, but nobody talks about responsibility. And with rights come responsibility. They are two sides of the same coin. You have the right to defend your own life, but you have a responsibility to not harm someone else in that defense. So like people talk about, you have the right to you have the right to the freedom of speech, right? But in a society where you get along with people, you have a responsibility to not use that freedom to just go around insulting people and hurting people and hurting people's feelings and stuff like that. You have the right to privacy, right? But because you have the right to privacy, that means that you have a responsibility to not hide things from the people that you care about and not destroy relationships with people. Like every right that you have, there is a corresponding responsibility. And you can't have that without a virtuous people, a moral people. And there are what is considered moral at least in the US and in Western civilization more broadly, is really dictated by Judeo-Christian thought, because, some of the indigenous tribes in South America, I don't remember which one it was, so I don't want to go ahead and speak out of turn, but I know there was one that would, they practiced human sacrifice. That was moral to them because they believed that this was how you made God happy, and this would provide for the rest of the tribe. Well, in Judeo-Christian thought, human sacrifice is not acceptable. That's immoral. And when you take Judeo-Christian morality and apply it to the state, that all people have a spark of divinity in them, that all people are endowed by their creator with certain rights. And these rights are the right to own your own life, to own property, to act in the world in a way that will best produce happiness and satisfaction for that person without violating the rights of other people, then you apply that to a government and you end up with something that is similar to, if not the United States particularly, but more broad Western democracies, or Western republics. I'm not a big fan of democracy per se. I think it's a good tool, but because of the fact that too many people think that a democracy would allow them to vote people's rights away, I got to put the brakes on there. It's like, hold on, democracy's only a tool, and you can have bad results with democracy. So that's a little asterisk or whatever on what I'm saying.
I just started the audiobook on Democracy, the God That Failed. So I don't know if you've looked in that at all. So, but that the concept being in that.
No,
book,
but I should.
Yeah, it's by Hoppe. It's one of those books that was like impossible to get hold of, and they finally got around to putting on Audible because it's like one of those ones always out of print, but it's like a super famous book. It's just Hans Hermann Hoppe, and in that one he goes into how actually monarchy is superior to democracy. But if you hear
spicy,
if you hear about it, makes sense.
Spicy.
Like if you hear about it, makes sense because it's like a monarchy is usually passed on from like through bloodlines, and they actually have more of a incentive to keep the country together. You know what I mean? Like because when the democracy, you dissipate the responsibility amongst not only all your representatives but amongst everybody. Because in democracy, it's like we are the government, but in a fucking monarchy, it's like no, that dude's the government, and if he fucks up, we'll roll out the guillotine. Yeah, and then also too, warfare in a monarchy is much different than it is in like democracy, because warfare was usually, especially a feudal system, was set up among the lords and knights and stuff, and those were people who kind of in a sense already agreed to it, because they're like, hey, here you get this land, but with this land comes, if I call on you, you're gonna come fight. And so the peasants usually just kind of chilled while the royal people were doing their dumb shit, and like, all right, whatever.
I mean, I'll have to check it out. I don't know that I'm swayed by the cliff notes of the argument, but I do definitely see significant problems with democracy when people think that democracy means you can vote people's rights away, and you see that tendency in the United States, and you've seen that impulse strongly in the past year specifically. People have been saying, oh, you don't have a right to go out and get other people sick. They have no way of knowing if you have COVID, if you're transmitting COVID, but they're still very comfortable with saying you need to be locked down with force if necessary to prevent the possibility of you transmitting COVID to other people. We touched a little bit on vaccine passports and stuff, and those, I'm fully 100% against any kind of vaccine passport, but there are people out there that are very comfortable saying, we voted to have these, so you have to show us your papers. We vote, and obviously anyone that's in any way interested in this, the right to self-defense and in gun control and stuff, there are plenty of people out there that are very interested in saying, we voted, you don't have the right to own that gun. You don't have the right to keep your house private. We think that the government should be able to go into your home and search your home because we think you might have a gun. And so people are very, very interested in voting your rights away, even if they deny it. They will lie to your face, and they will deny all day long that they want to do it, and then they will vote all of your goddamn rights away. So I am very much opposed to a direct democracy because it is a terrible idea, because people have some horrific impulses when they think that it's for the greater good.
Yeah, no, direct democracy, and really, I would even argue a constitutional republic, which is just democracy in more steps. The incentives are just fucked. It's just, I do think that it does to some extent, the constitutional republic generally does buttress you against those incentives to some extent. But I mean, I'm not going to get into the whole of that. But yeah, it definitely is like the incentives are all wrong. Like the voters have, they all they have to do is gain by, like, say for example, it's a budget for, should we have UBI or whatever, or some shit. Like, of course they're gonna vote for it. Like, especially like what do they have to lose? Like, and especially because they're, I mean, when you dissipate the responsibility of governance among the entire populace, it becomes, they also are all low information voters. Like,
and they're voting for results, whether or not those results are actually, it is possible to produce those results. If you have people that say, if you have a politician that says, I'm going to do this, and people say, I want that, so I'm going to vote for that politician, there is no reason to believe that just because the government passes some law, that what the politician said he's going to do is actually going to be produced at all, first of all. And second of all, it's not guaranteed that it's going to be produced without externalities that are far worse than the situation without trying to produce whatever result was promised.
Yeah. All right. We kind of touched on morality a little bit, and I kind of wanted to go back to that because there is something to me and you both being atheists, and I was kind of mentioning that there is utility to religion. I do think, especially when it comes to morality, that was kind of what I was driving at, and you kind of, went there as well, is I do think there's something to, yes, with the Judeo-Christian like values and stuff. It is this pre-set up fucking, set up values and morals. And I completely agree that, like, with most atheists, and that you can completely come to a functioning, like, good moral system through logic. But it's really pretty simple. It's like, I don't like when people hurt me or take my stuff, so I should advocate for others to not hurt people and take their stuff. But for some reason, people struggle with that. So that's where, like, religion kind of comes in. So I want to kind of know, like, how do you derive your morality? Like, I know the big divide, everyone's like objective, subjective, I mean, a lot of times it's just semantics anyways, but I kind of want to get how you derive your morality, and go.
Well, for me, I don't know. I guess I'm a bit of an idealist, because I think that things like my word are important. And just because I'm saying that, and other people will say that too, does not mean that they actually believe it. There have been, and for me to say this, I don't expect people to really believe me, honestly. So I was in the Marine Corps, back in the 90s for a minute. I got a medical discharge and I got sent home. So it's nothing to boast about or anything. But one of the things that attracted me to the Marine Corps was the whole, duty and honor part of it. Like, I think that it is important to try to protect your honor. And I think that there are some significant benefits to an honor society, which we don't have an honor society anymore. But I do think that there are benefits to having at least respect for an honor society, and to try to protect your word and your honor. People are going to go ahead and assault you, verbally assault you all the time, and they're going to do what they can to slander you, especially the more you do, the more heat you're going to take from people that just don't like the fact that you're doing something. But I do think things like your word is important. I think that it's important to do the right thing when it comes to business dealings. I don't, there might be people out there that didn't like working with me, but there's no one out there that's going to say that I was unfair in the way that the business dealing went down. There's no one that's going to say that I went back on my word. if I said something, I made sure, or I do my best to make sure that that's what happens. And if it doesn't happen, it is because of something out of my control, and it is still my fault because I'm the one that was responsible for making that happen. There's a thing that goes on in with some of the guys, some friends of mine that are in special forces and stuff. And one of the things is, if you mess up, you need to be the first person that's telling everyone else that you messed up. You need to make sure that everyone knows you messed up, and they need to hear it from you, and you need to say, I won't do it again. If you mess up and someone else finds out and you try to hide it or you try to shirk responsibility, then you've messed up twice, because you did the mess up and then you messed up by not taking responsibility for it and owning it, you know? And those kind of things matter to me. And to some people, they don't. But I think that in a virtuous society, those kind of things are foundational, because if you have a society that everybody knows that when you shake hands and say, I'm going to do this in a business dealing, if everybody pretty much believes that the person that says I'm going to do this is going to do it, you have a society that has significantly less friction. And the less friction in your society, the easier it is to do business, the easier it is to have community, because you can trust your neighbors, you can trust, the people that you're doing business with, et cetera. If you have a low trust society, you end up with crime. If you have a low trust society, you end up with people that are stabbing each other in the back, and you end up with bad business dealings, and you end up with an economy that doesn't work as well as it could, because you don't trust people in your business and in doing business. And so that means you have to have more lawyers, and you have to have more protections, and you have to have more bureaucracy, and in a low trust society, you end up with more big government and bigger government. And government in and of itself will always try to accumulate power. So if you have a government that's trying to accumulate power and a low trust society, you end up with people going to the government for redress of grievances more. So it becomes a loop. I forget the term for it. A positive, negative feedback. Yeah, feedback loop where. Yep. Where you've got bad results, people go to the government gets more power, and the government having more power produces bad results. And so people live with those bad results. They go to the government for redress of grievance, and it just tends to feed on itself. So I'm not really sure where that came from, aside from that was kind of what was instilled in me by my father. Mm-hmm. But I think that that's right. And it's not the easy way to live. It's not the easy task. It is very humbling, because you see how frequently you fail. You see how frequently you're tempted to be like, man, I can just not say anything and I can scoot out of here right now and no one will know, but and when you take shortcuts and you cheat and you don't do the things you could do, you're the person that knows. And that, at least for me, it kind of eats at me. And again, I am fully aware that I have failed and had shortcomings, and I do constantly, but I really do try to live a virtuous and honorable life,
Yeah, no, I think that's a good answer. Like, I mean, fucking at the end of the day, reputation's all you have. So even yep. Really, I don't think it pays to be a skeevy fuck. Like, yeah. It's like in the long run. I mean, don't get me wrong. I kind of am like, you probably, I don't know if you've read Stirner, but I kind of like in a lot of ways take a lot of my morality from Stirner, and that I think, principles should serve you and not the other way around. But I also think in a sense, it serves you to, for the most part, operate by those principles. But it's one of those things that if you get in a situation where you have conflicting values, it's kind of like, at the end of the day, I'm going to go with what serves me. But that only really applies in insane scenarios. It's just that a lot of people get caught up on those and like, what would I do if my family was starving? And it's like, well, do what the fuck you gotta do.
That's a reasonable perspective.
Yeah.
You know, when you're talking about starvation and stuff like that. In today's society, very rarely are you really faced with those kind of choices.
No,
very
at this
rarely.
point, it's all my family's getting too fat.
I mean, you know,
yeah.
What is it? 70% of America is overweight to some extent, you know?
Yeah, it's I can't help but laugh whenever you hear like the fucking statistics about the people who are starving in America. And you're like, fuck off. No. Like define starving. But all right, let's bring it back full circle. We kind of talked about the minarchy anarchy thing. I'm gonna do my best to not be an asshole fucking autistic, you know, anarchist and try to argue with you, because I just want to hear you out here at your perspective. It sounds like you're kind of more minarchist-ish, but I've heard some things that make me think I think you really might be an anarchist. Because so I guess first off, I think the two things. Do you find the state to be legitimate? Do you find it legitimate for it to happen? Are you just do you take the stance it's a necessary evil? Is that where you're coming from?
I don't know that it's necessary. But I've yet to see. I don't know how we have the absence of the state, I guess. The idea, it sounds great, right? Like the idea that all people are free without live a voluntary lifestyle where they live without coercion. Like that sounds great. And I am on board. How do we get there? That's literally it. Like, how do we move and consider, especially starting at the point where we literally live in in a country with the biggest, most expansive, most technologically advanced government in all of human history. How do we move from where we are to a stateless society, or at least a point where inside of the borders that we currently have, how do we move to the point where there is no state? Because I'm not against it. I love the idea of privatizing as much stuff as possible, up to and including the police and courts if we could. But again, I am not the smartest guy in the room, and I don't know how we do. But I'm not opposed to it at all, and I have no particular love for the government or for the state at all.
Okay, I got you. I used this analogy the other day with, I think it was Patrick McFarland. I was talking to him, and we were talking about this very same thing. How I think in a lot of times people, I get people get hung up on whether it's necessary, but I think, you're kind of on the line. Would you technically? It really is all semantics. But at the end of the day, what really matters, do you recognize the legitimacy? And we kind of talked about, because it's in principle, the government is no different than a mob.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Yes, but
because they're just the legitimacy comes at the barrel of comes out of the barrel of a gun.
But now the difference between a mob and a government is the perception by the populace that's ruling over. Sure. So a mob will generally, most people that live in a town that's run by the mob, they won't recognize its legitimacy as ruling over them, but it will be one of those things where it's well, there's Tommy, and he's going to shoot me in the fucking face if I don't give him protection money. So here's your protection money. And it's if we can get people to that point where at least they can recognize it, whether or not it's necessary or not, it's kind of almost a misnomer. At the very least, if we could just get people to recognize, hey, this is not legitimate. These are thieves taking your fucking money. Then cool. And it is one of those things where I think it becomes unsustainable at that point. So yeah.
Again, I don't have any kind of objection to anything you're saying, because the way the government behaves, it's unquestionably, it's force, it's violence, it's threats of force, it's coercion. That's the only thing the government has. They can, they control the issuance of the currency, but you also have the ability to say, you can use other things. Gold and silver still work. If someone wants to pay me in Bitcoin, gold, or silver, I will still, I will trade with them. There are gold backs out there, gold back bills that I've got some coming in the mail soon. I'll take gold coins. I'll take Bitcoin. I have no problem with, living in the gray markets and stuff like that. So, yeah, I totally respect that perspective that the government is illegitimate, is not fit to exist and is illegitimate in its methods. So yeah, I mean, I'm not opposed to those ideas at all.
Yeah, no, but good luck paying your mortgage with that. I mean, I kind of get your point too, whereas like, it's almost like this, like whether it's necessary or not, it's almost like we have to prove it. And it's like shit like what you just mentioned about being like, well, I'll accept gold, I'll accept Bitcoin. It's like doing it in demonstration. It's kind of, a lot of people talk about living anarchy or living free. So it's like, if you could, it's about creating, really is a lot of it's like entrepreneurship. So like that, or if you're someone who maybe can figure out some way to where, you can develop a mortgage system that isn't so like with its balls in the clamp of the government. Like, I mean, obviously that's a long ways off. Like great things like, you've heard of Freedom Cells by John Bush, where literally like he's like just building up groups of like localized people. It's almost a network of people where they're just kind of like engaging in sort of a lot of gray market activities, stuff like that. And it's like the idea is as it builds, I think he's in like tens of thousands now, but all across the world. But as that grows, like you can kind of demonstrate how this would really work. Like he's even saying like eventually once it gets big enough, you might be able to be like, hey, call the group, so-and-so is getting red flagged, shit like that. Like, so, and I think that's kind of how we demonstrate how it can react and how it can work. And maybe we're wrong. Maybe it doesn't work. Maybe we're ingrained to have this belief in authority and it's inescapable and it'll never happen. But I don't think so. I like to be optimistic, but I can kind of get the hang up. And it is one of those things where it's like, but we need to demonstrate it. I think with things like Bitcoin, shit like that, we kind of 3D printing, we kind of almost are slowly demonstrating like, well, fuck you, we're going to do what we want.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think that technology is the means to do that, because people talk about, oh, well, Bitcoin, it's traceable and da. Sure, but there's still Monero and there's Zcash and there's other cryptocurrencies that are designed to be actually private and designed to be fast. And Bitcoin's kind of that on-ramp for a lot of people, because once you've got Bitcoin, you can trade for other cryptocurrencies. And again, I'll take Monero, I'll take Zcash. If I could find if I could do a tour where we got paid in Bitcoin or whatever, I'd be fine with that. I'd do the tour where we got paid in Bitcoin, but I can't find a bus company that's going to take silver. I can't find a bus company that's going to take Bitcoin or take cryptocurrency. I can't pay my taxes with Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, and that will get dudes at my house with guns.
Yeah, you're
and
at
I ain't
that
getting
point
that
where they
gunfight. One of the things that people like to say is like, especially on Twitter, it's like people are real quick to call other people bootlickers because like, oh well, So I forget what it was. Someone had made a comment about getting into a gunfight, getting into a gunfight with the cops, and or listening or whatever. And it's like, look, you're gonna lose the gunfight with the cops because there's more cops. Like even if you get into a gunfight with the cops and you win, like that gunfight, you will be getting into another gunfight with the cops, and you're outgunned. So you might as well, like, if people are like, oh, don't lick the boot, you might as well start the Glock, because you're gonna get killed.
Yeah, it depends on what you're defining. Yeah. If you're saying like, oh, you wouldn't fight the cops, it's like, I mean, the scary thing to me in that scenario though is that like a lot of these like no knocks and shit like that, they're exactly that. They're no knocks and just someone busting through your door. And I'm not gonna lie, I keep my shit locked and ready to go and fucking in a reliable location nearby. Yeah, like fucking, like, so if someone bursts through my door in the middle of the night or fucking creates some loud noise, I'm immediately just gonna jump out of bed and grab the gun and like not miss a beat. So yeah, I mean, that's the scary part. Now, if somehow I realize along the way this is cops, okay, like, and this isn't to me be like I'm some bootlicker, but I'm also not fucking retarded. Like, I'm gonna be like, And especially, I mean, it'd be one thing if I was like a single guy, like maybe I could be like, oh, I'll go out in a blaze of glory just because it's fucking badass. But even then, probably not. But with a family,
because if you go out, you don't get to watch yourself being a badass on the news tomorrow. You're out. Like, that's it. You know, you're down for the dirt nap.
And there is something too. I think like someone who's well trained can actually probably take down a good slew of pigs, but they're gonna win by attrition.
You are going to lose that gunfight, you know.
And even if you somehow win, like you're good luck. I mean, you always hear these like crazy stories about like witnesses or some shit later or something that somehow just mysteriously fucking gone.
They don't call it suicide by cop for nothing. Like if you run out there with a gun, they call it suicide by cop for a reason, because you're going out there knowing you're going to die, you know? So, I mean, I don't endorse fighting the cops. Fight in court. Hopefully you'll win in court. I mean, I mean, that ain't a good option either. Don't get it, you know, don't get me wrong. I ain't saying that like, you know, that the courts are something that you can rely on, but your chances are better in court than they are in that gunfight with those officers stacked up wearing body armor, and you're there with your dick hanging out and your rifle, you know, like you're naked, homeboy. You are fucking naked. They got body armor and those bullets are coming fucking fast.
No, it is dumb. A lot of people do get hung up on that. And I don't know, that's just like lower level thinking. And it's like, I will admit that I don't think there's anything morally wrong with that. If that's what you want to do, and if they burst through your door, fucking go right ahead. Like, but I don't think it's gonna work out well for you.
Be my guest. I'm not getting into a gunfight with the cops.
No, I completely agree. This is exactly why I think the boog. I always joke about the boog being the big dumb, and it's like a lot of people get upset with me, and I'm like, I think it's kind of stupid. I mean, depends on what you mean, like definitions wise, but like. Yeah. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, we could totally take over. I'm like, I don't disagree. You can. It's just, is it worth it? Like, I mean, if you get enough people, sure, maybe. But
when I think of the boog situation where it works, it's like, look, you're gonna end up with your community, and you're going to be taking care of your community. Yes. If you're in a city, you are fucking dead. Mm-hmm. Like that's it. You are doomed. You are absolutely doomed. So like the people that would survive the boog are the people that have already gotten out of the cities. You know, if you live in the city, you are fucking doomed. Mm.
I mean, really, I think that's just a good pathway going forward, period. Like, get the fuck out of the cities.
Get out of the fucking cities.
Especially boog-wise, that's true, too. But, I mean, my line with the boog usually is if it's just some collectivized defense thing, sure. Like, but if you're in any offensive capacity against the state, you are fucked. And even then, in a defensive capacity, you better have the numbers.
Yeah. You know, and the thing is, if you've got a as much as, you know, we just spent the past hour dumping on voting and democracy and stuff, but if you've got a sheriff that's good, at least that sheriff has to serve his community, because they will get voted out. They have some kind of incentive to do what the people of the area want. You know, the people that they're charged with being the sheriff for the county or whatever. So at the very least, they have to answer to the people on that level. Local police forces, that's all political. They got to answer. They got to answer to the mayor, and the mayor probably doesn't have to answer to the people. You know. For the most part, your bureaucracies in cities are almost no better than the federal government, especially when you're dealing with a larger city. You know, so
I mean, there is definitely something too, like say what I mentioned, John Bush, with this localized networks of people, because even in those situations when you're dealing with like a local sheriff or whatever, it's like, you know, like, yo, like we know where you live, so I mean, shit, what was it? Old fentanyl homeboy, fucking
George Floyd.
Yeah, yeah, him. They were
fentanyl
people out.
Homeboy. Jesus Christ.
I'll get shit on for that. I'm not saying it was all okay that he got squished, or there was. I mean, obviously this is all fucking result of the state. Just the first thing that came to mind.
Disavow.
Yeah, I mean, it's also questionable was it OD or not. I don't know. I don't really care either way. The cop acted in an improper fashion. whatever. I caveated all that. Either way, I remember people were like at that dude's house, like like. I mean, especially if you create more of a localized presence, there's something to that. And I would have legit. The only thing I was concerned about in that scenario for like the horde of people at his house was like his family. But if you could be like, it's just him in the house, for okay. I mean, do whatever you want. But yeah, no better way to end this. I'll just leave it right there. But yeah, no, I do think there's definitely something to the localized thing. But with that, I'm gonna go ahead and bring it to an end. You want to go ahead and drop whatever plugs you got in case people are living a rock and don't know who you are.
I'm Phil That Remains. So I'm Phil That Remains on Twitter. I'm Phil That Remains on Twitch. I stream Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, singing All That Remains songs. I'm Phil That Remains on YouTube. My Patreon, if you want to check that out, that's patreon.com/Phil That Remains. I post videos that I make of shooting, of meditating, which is probably one of the more boring ones because I just sit there for 15, 20 minutes. But I post videos from the studio recording, behind the scenes stuff from making All That Remains records, memes, all kinds of stuff. So, and it's $3. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, check out the Patreon. It's patreon.com/Phil That Remains. So, and if you're wondering if I'm on a social media platform, just look, search for Phil That Remains, and that's probably me.
All right, cool. Awesome. I was just, this is a little improper. We already did your plugs, but I was just thinking one more thing I wanted to ask you. If you had a minute, we keep it short. I was just curious what your influences were that have kind of brought you along this line of thinking. So, because I know everyone's
politically?
Just politically, philosophically, morally, whatever, all that shit, just in general. I mean, a lot of those kind of go hand in hand. So
I'm a Ron Paul guy. So yeah. When I was a teenager, I thought Bill Clinton was cool because he was on MTV playing the saxophone and he smoked pot and, kind of wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And then when impeachment happened, he lied under oath. And I was like, well, he lied, so they got to remove him from office. And then people were like, oh, it's only a blowjob. And I'm like, wait a minute, it's not about the blowjob. He lied. And so then my impression was the Democrats are the party that lies. And then we had the Iraq war and weapons of mass destruction and blah, blah, blah. And then I realized, holy cow, the Republicans are the party that lies too. Or the party that lies as well. And I was like, well, they're all just garbage. And then I, heard about this guy named Ron Paul and started reading, stuff that he was talking about. And I started listening to Tom Woods and I learned who Lysander Spooner was. And I read Bastiat and, Milton Friedman and going on through the libertarian ideas or libertarian thinkers and stuff. And so, but Ron Paul was the guy for me. He was the guy that was like, hey, you can think that it's okay to own guns and also think that the drug war is bad and also think that the war in Iraq is bad and also think that the federal government is bad and taxation is theft and et cetera. And he was just speaking my language. Yeah,
no, I mean, pretty much if you don't like Ron Paul, then fuck you. But I mean, that's kind of where I stand with people.
as far as libertarian ideas that have been in the government, I mean, Ron Paul is pretty great. I like Thomas Massey. He's pretty. He's one of the handful that I liked. I like Justin Amash. There was some stuff that I disagree with. Probably both of them on, but they're the guys that I kind of have a bit of at least sympathy for. They're
hit or miss, that's for sure. Rand's a little disappointing, but
I get why Rand's disappointing, but I still of the the people that are in Washington, Rand, Mike Lee, Thomas Massey, and Amash isn't there anymore, but those three are pretty good. They're politicians, but
when you're like comparing them to Ronnie, you're like, oh, fuck.
Yeah, you can't compare them to Ron and be like, oh, all right, these guys are great. Yeah. But at the same time, you can definitely compare them to, I don't know, Liz Cheney.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's definitely
Yeah.
credit where credit's due. They're great on a lot of shit. Like fucking Rand was just holding Fauci's feet to the fire
Yep.
like just the other day. I mean, like there's always some good shit, but every now and then you'll just see some shit. You're like, whoa, what the fuck?
Absolutely.
Like
Absolutely.
like Rand just the other day, I don't remember what it was, but it was like, you know, kissing cop ass for something stupid. And it was like, and it just, I mean, yeah, they play the political game, and it's like this point, especially with somebody like Rand, whose dad was like,
Yeah.
you know, it's kind of like that, like a fucking Star Wars quote, like you were the chosen one.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that. You know.
But it is what it is. Yeah, we already did the plug. So for me, I'm on No Way Jose YouTube channel. Anywhere audio podcasts are at. Hit me up at thelibertymovementglobal@gmail.com. Like I said earlier, give me money. Patreon.com. So it's No Way Jose 2020. Or with crypto at endthefed.app. Like, share, subscribe, comment, all that stuff. Dude, it's been fucking awesome. Really appreciate you coming on.
No sweat, man. It was a good time.
Yeah, hell yeah. All right, we're going to end broadcast now.